We go, and we are live. Welcome to episode 4 of Revenue Talent Talks. I'm Chris Gannon, the founder of Captivate Talent, and today I have Drew Brucker, VP of Sales at Lasso. Drew not only got his VP of Sales job at Lasso, but he got a huge promotion last year. He's also the father of 2 twin girls. Welcome to the show, Drew. Really happy to have you here today. How are you?
Thanks, man. That is the real promotion, right? That's a promotion I wasn't ready for, honestly. So.
You have 9 months to prepare for that one.
I know, but it's like, that last week hits you and you're just like, I'm going to wake up this time next week and I'm going to be a dad twice. So was the reality. I'm still trying to figure it out.
This is the last time I'll be able to wake up when I want to wake up? Was that kind of the...
Yep, absolutely. Awesome. Still true.
Well, congratulations on not only that promotion, but you got another big one last year. We'll talk about those, but I want to hear about the beginning part of your life and your career and beyond even what's on LinkedIn. I'm curious. I ask everyone this. What was your first job ever? And why'd you go get it? What'd you learn from it?
Yeah, I think the reason I got it was my parents made me with a lot of kids, right? I think it was right when I got a car, right? And it's like, now it's time to get a job. So that job was working at Kmart, of all places. So I'll never forget that job.
Attention Kmart shoppers.
Attention blue light special. I mean, it was still to this day probably the hardest job I ever had. I did all the grunt work there. It was the cart pushing right before the machines existed. You're out there on a summer day gathering like 100 carts, lining them up through the parking lot and pushing them in, and doing that, cleaning up the messy aisles that exist after holidays, or straightening all the products on the shelves. It was, wear the red smock.
What'd you take away from that? Did you learn anything when you walked away? I mean, did you reflect back on it? And aside from maybe I don't want to do that job forever, so I better get moving.
I liked Walmart better was the takeaway.
Walmart better.
No, I think the takeaway was, and this kind of reflected itself in jobs after that, was like everything's your job. There's nothing that's not your job. That was kind of what this role was. I took that mentality with, a lot of jobs after that still do to this day in a lot of ways. But that's probably the best takeaway I got of it. There are certain things that you're required to do and other things that just need to be done. And so jumping in and doing those things always comes in handy. So
the first job that comes up on your LinkedIn, you had it would seem like many people's dream job out of school. You got to work for the St. Louis Cardinals, right?
Yeah, dream job for me too. I mean, from St. Louis, diehard Cardinals fan, been all my life. Went to school, had an internship with their AA team while I was still in school, finished that up, got a big boy gig with the St. Louis Cardinals. It's a very tough place to get into. It's a family type environment, and that's what I went to school for. I was originally a sports management major, and so did that, loved it, but man, the pay was peanuts. And
ticket sales, right?
Ticket sales, and then Chris, you'll also remember this was 2008, 2009, right? So it was like tough to get a job. You're in the recession. I get my job. I'm there. I get hired with, 15, 20 other people. And it's one of those organizations where it's like, once you're in, right? They'll find a place for you. Everybody starts in ticket sales, and then you kind of, redistribute based on people's skills. And I'll never forget, after that first year, they just came up to us. They were like, look, we can't keep anybody like this. We hate to do this to you guys, but we just got to let you go. Right. And so I had one thing on my, real big boy resume. And I just remember trying to find a gig for months. And that ultimately led me down to Atlanta. And I had some family down here, and just kind of opened up the doors and said, hey, look, if you want to try something new, come down here. And I did. 2 weeks later, I was on the road, never looked back.
And it was right.
Office Depot. There's one that's not on there, Chris, and that's AT&T. I started cold calling for business in the Yellow Pages, doing ads. That's how I started. Boiler room type stuff.
We actually share some history. My first job out of school was Yellow Book, so I was your competition back in the day.
Oh, so man.
Yeah, trying to convince people that the internet was slow and it's faster to find somebody in the phone book than it was on the when you booted up your computer. That was, I think, our pitch back then.
Yeah. It's just like, and then you had the managers walking up and down the aisles, making sure you're on the phone every second. I remember if you sold like a digital ad back then, you were like a god, because it just started happening, and it's like, you sold a digital. What is digital? So that's like how ancient that whole thing was. So did that for a couple months, hated it, then went to Office Depot, right?
That's funny you say that, because we had digital, and there's probably somebody that's like 24 listening to this right now being like, these two dinosaurs are like, all right, when are we going to get into something that I can use? Like, let's jump into
exactly.
the 21st century right now. So you spent a while in sales, and then you got into real estate development. And when did you kind of realize like that was not what you wanted to do and it's time for a change?
Yeah. So, the AT&T thing, the Office Depot thing, which was a whole nother story. I had this, just crazy boss that wouldn't let me talk to, and the people that she hired us on with, talk to the rest of the team because she was so jaded by the other members of the team. So, you go from back-to-back experiences being in Atlanta from, the phone book to this, and you're just like, life's got to get better, right? And I just thought to myself, how could I still do sales, but something that's maybe more approachable, maybe face-to-face? That's how I got into property management. Did that for, 3 or 4 years, and really built a good reputation with a reputable company, and got to this point where I just kind of reached as far as I wanted to go there. I didn't know what was next. And I had a competitor reach out, talk to me. We just talked about the opportunity to switch into marketing, and they might be willing to take a chance on me. And so I just kind of weaseled my way in, man. I knew social media at the time. Like I taught some courses, for employees at Camden, just trying to teach them how Facebook works. And again, going back to the dinosaur stuff, but that was like my ticket in, right? So if I could just get a chance, then I felt like this was a great opportunity for me. And it was.
So let me ask you, just from like your title was community manager. It seems like it was a pretty big job at your previous company.
Yeah.
And then you moved to like digital marketing specialist. And, from an aesthetic standpoint, it almost sounds like it's a step back from a title perspective, at least. And maybe even it could have been from a pay perspective. Like, did that make sense for you at the time? Like, how did you kind of overcome that? Like, hey, I'm taking a step back maybe, and I'm not the top dog anymore in my company.
Yeah, well, actually there was a bigger step back with going into property management. I was making, pretty decent money at the time for 25-year-old at Office Depot in sales, but I just hated it so much, that I was looking for something that actually spoke to me, and so that's how I landed in property management. I took, I think, a 20,000-30,000 pay cut there, so that was the humbling job. I think when I went from community manager to specialist, it was pretty much a lateral move in terms of compensation, but I just looked at all the other elements beyond pay that it was going to provide, and so it was a no-brainer at that point.
Yeah, I think that's a really good takeaway for a lot of people, that if you might have to take a step back, and the compensation might not be worth it if you're waking up and you're miserable every day and you're just not happy doing what you're doing. Because it seems like you always had a passion for creativity and marketing. I mean, you're a semi-professional photographer, or looks like, from what I've seen on when I stalked your Instagram, it looks like you're almost a professional photographer.
Yeah, like professional is a strong word. Like, I don't know what classifies you as a professional. I mean, maybe if it's my full-time job, maybe. I mean, I got really into it to the point where, I was getting some of my work published, but it really wasn't something that I wanted to do for compensation, because it just took away from some of the pure joy, behind doing it. I wanted to take pictures of things that I wanted to take pictures of, not anything else anybody wanted me to. And so that was just something I picked up on the fly. I do that a lot, with a lot of different skills. I've done that with graphic design. I've done that with drawing. I've done that with photography. I've done that with, I've got a typewriter at home where I just got into that for a while. I just do that stuff all the time. It's just a different outlet for me. So I love photography. I'm hoping to get more back, get a further grasp on it once the kids are a little bit older and manageable.
I would say from your from what I have seen, and if you have been published, I think you can add professional photographer to your bio. I mean, I would say you're pretty close to that.
I appreciate that.
Pretty impressive work out there. So, what was it seemed that you were doing this marketing thing for this property management company. It seemed like it was going well. It looked like you got a promotion there. You went up to director of marketing, right?
Yep.
Why'd you leave? Like, what attracted you to the SaaS world? Like, it seemed like you pivoted your career again.
Yeah, and that was actually a really tough place to leave, because it was like I knew that industry really well because I was boots on the ground, and then I'm sitting in this, corporate office with area vice presidents that manage multiple communities nationwide. And I'm really the sole marketing person on that team. I worked with, my manager was a learning and development specialist. So she was basically doing all the trainings for people on site. There was a marketing manager there, but he was very specific about the things that he did. And then it was me. Like I really got the reins in autonomy to kind of like figure out how I could be effective there, right? So, I focused on things like online reputation management at the time, which, if you're making a big decision like apartments, reviews were a big thing. And a lot of these communities didn't care about their online reputation, and that would affect sales, right? So, if you have no proactive strategy there, you're just going to let people bash you online. So one of the things that I put in place there was like this online reputation management system and process. And all of a sudden our company went from not caring, not ranked, to nationally ranking for online reputation management. I got to teach there. I got to be on site and develop people on site, which again was very relatable. And it just got to a point, I think, for me where I was super comfortable. Like I did not have to make a move, but I was luckily dating this girl at the time and I married her, that was just pushing me and just said, I think you could do something more. And I believed her, and she was right. Like I really thought about it. I didn't have to make the move, but what the key was that company that was recruiting me was a vendor in the space. So I went from the customer side to the vendor side, which made a really natural and easier transition because I still knew the space. It was just going to the SaaS side of things. I knew I wanted to learn more. I knew I needed somebody alongside me that could teach me what I don't know. And it was an uncomfortable, leap of faith, but ultimately it paid off.
I think you highlighted another really good takeaway in there, and we give people that advice a lot if they're looking to switch industries and they're in something like hospitality. We go like, just go map out the hospitality tech companies. Like those are the ones where they're going to look at you and you're going to have the most value out of the gate. And you might even have more value than somebody who's just been at 3 other SaaS companies and doesn't know the buyer, doesn't know the industry, doesn't know the.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah, that's an awesome move. You're almost like taking the playbook of how to transition into a SaaS industry right there.
I had no idea what I was doing at that time. None.
It doesn't make sense when you're doing it, but when you look back,
at
least you can jump on a podcast and tell a good story.
That's right.
But so now, in terms of like getting into that space, you jumped in, and things had to be different for you. I mean, you're different metrics, VC funding, grow. Like, what'd you do when you first jumped in? Like, how'd you learn? What were some tricks or some tips that you would give somebody if they're jumping into their first SaaS job, maybe from another type of industry?
Yeah, the first day I remember walking in that office and I was just like, these people are so effing smart. I was like, I got to be the dumbest person here. A bunch of Ivy League people. I mean, people that had started previous companies. Just all walks of life that were just really polished. And for me, I went from this, sort of casual marketing environment to something that was a little bit more buttoned up, a little bit more. Required a little bit more finesse and understanding. And so I'm not really sure. I think what got me there and how I acted was I just tried to do the things that most people wouldn't do, right? I think a lot of people just try to do the bare minimum, make excuses for being stuck. blame people, etc. So for me, I was just trying to find ways. How could I take a look at the job description, go beyond the job description, create my own opportunities within it, learn, talk to people, and just try to follow my own plan and work collaboratively with the team that was there. And I also had an awesome team. Like the team that I had there was super, super talented. And so we just had a really good understanding of what each other's strengths were. And we utilized those. You know, we had the opportunity to really throw around a lot of ideas and talk through them without judgment and be creative. And so ultimately, like, those things gave me more confidence along the way as I got more and more settled in.
Go ahead, Chris. I was gonna say, as you were coming into this role and trying to figure out what was going on, do you think it almost helped having that humility when you walked in the door, and maybe the perception that there were people that were more talented, which might not have been the case, but do you think that was almost like an advantage that you had because you haven't been jaded maybe by the industry or the space, or you thought you knew what you were talking about, it allowed you to learn a lot?
Yeah, it could be. Like, I still have that to this day. You know, even when I took this job, it's a new industry for me. So, you know, I still felt that way. It's like, you know, you get in those first couple of meetings, you're just like, I have no idea what the hell's going on right now. You know, and so you got to be comfortable being uncomfortable. You got to realize that there's going to be these moments of being overwhelmed. At that time, I didn't know what that felt like. So I remember having some very difficult conversations with my wife. I'm like, I don't know if I can do this. Like, these people are smart. They know what they're talking about. They're using all these words I've never heard before, this, that, the other. So I think it did help in some aspects, and others. It's certainly nice to go into, you know, roles now where you're a little bit more comfortable with yourself. You know what your strengths and weaknesses are. You can take advantage of the lessons that you learned along the way.
So if you were going to go back and tell uncomfortable Drew back in 2016, sitting in that job for the first day, like, what are some things that you did or advice you'd give back to yourself? Like, how'd you catch up? Like, how'd you get on the same level as all those people that you were with?
I just, you know, I still have this. I thought a lot of people were like this. Maybe it's, you know, a handful of people. Maybe it's a select few. I have no idea. But I was obsessed with learning, still am. Like, I think I put a lot of pressure on myself. So when I get into those jobs, it bothers me when I don't know the answers. So I go looking for it, right? Like, I just fully immerse myself. And that goes with a job, but any skill too, right? If I deem a skill as a necessity or something that I'm genuinely interested in, I go deep, you know, like I'm trying to pick it up and be sufficient and proficient with it. But the advice I would give to myself and anybody that's breaking in right now would be, talk to other people that are in the shoes that you want to fill. You know, there are just so many people out there that are willing to help. So if you're proactive and you try to create relationships and build rapport, you can go talk to them, you know? So the biggest thing then is really just identifying the right kind of questions that you want to have answered. And, you know, if there are other things, you know, maybe even ask them if there are other things that you should be asking or thinking about, right? Like, really lean on the people that have been there. And so that's the advice I would give to myself.
Yeah, and I think if you land in the right place and you've sussed out a good company to work for, the right leaders like will really respond to those types of individuals, and you know they're going to give you more, and they're going to give you more of their time because they see you want to get to the next level. And if they're smart, they know if you get to the next level, they're most likely going to get to the next level too, or their job might be a little easier one day.
Yeah, for sure.
Drew, so then you had kind of you jumped into Rubicon and you won a few awards there, and it seems like you up-leveled yourself again. And then I noticed you changed March 2020. That's kind of like an infamous month for quite a lot of people.
Yeah, it is.
When I see that on a resume as a recruiter, I usually just assume it probably wasn't somebody that was just, you know, interviewing casually and decided that they wanted to switch jobs. I mean, did anything happen at that time for you? Was it more of like a change that you weren't expecting to have to make at that point in your life?
No, it was actually the previous. I had just been at Rubicon for a while. It was a great experience. I mean, the number of things I was able to learn there and build and the autonomy that I had, and to grow with that company was tremendous. It was really just a matter of, I had been there 3 years, and leadership had changed a few times. I think our direction had changed a few times. A manager that I cared about dearly and loved working with had left. I had another teammate leave. So, I mean, there was a little volatility there. I don't know that I was actively looking, though. I mean, it really just came down to an opportunity that was presented to me just in happenstance, right? Like, it was more of a coincidence. It had nothing to do with COVID. But, I remember starting that new gig, first week on the job, like day one, I'm at my boss's house, and we're just kind of planning out my first 30 days and what I'm going to do, and flew out to Oregon the next day. And I'm like, I was telling him, I was like, are you sure you want me to go out there? Like, what do we think about this COVID thing? And he's like, well, I don't think it's as bad as people think it's going to be. I'm like, okay. So like next day I'm at the airport, and, my mom's just blowing up my phone. She's like, bring the hand sanitizer with you, make sure you wipe down the seats and all, I'm just like, all right, Mom. So I go, and just everybody at the airport, it just felt a little bit different. Got to Oregon, did my thing for like 2 days. By the time I flew back, I mean, stock market's crashing. People are, NCAA, March Madness is canceled. NBA playoff, yeah. So I'm just like, okay, if they're canceling stuff like that, like this is unprecedented.
If the NCAA is looking to lose some money right now, things are going to get bad, right?
Things are going to go bad. And so, I got back, and I'm just wondering, like, I just got in the door. Is this going to be like a last one in, first one out kind of deal? There was some uncertainty there because, like, even my first or second week on the job too, we were going through budgets. I was working as a portfolio marketing director, so basically working with like a number of SaaS companies to, identify their go-to-market, what their strategy was for lead generation, things like that. And we were my boss was like, hey, look, we need to have conversations, you and the guy in finance, with every single one of these teams, and tell them that budgets are being cut by like 70-75%. I was like, okay, like, wow, like this is escalating very quickly here. So that was difficult, man. I mean, it was tough.
I'm curious, like, I mean, it seems like a really interesting job. I mean, you were with a PE firm. It seems like there were like 20 or 30 companies in the portfolio that you got to work with. What was your big takeaway or learning from there that, like, somebody like moving up their career in marketing, like you being able to zoom out and see all those different companies, what kind of advice could you push on to somebody that's trying to get up the ranks in their marketing career right now?
I mean, there's just something to be said about seeing things and experiencing them firsthand. So like the attraction to that role was really that, it was the ability to be the first marketing hire that they had on that team. They had no one there. To like really like level up quick, talk to all these different owners or C-suites and sales leaders and figure out, how we can swing open big doors for them with really marginal budgets, right? And I just wanted to learn as much as I could, like I just realized that my weakness at that time was really just at scale. I was in a bubble, I'd worked at Rubicon for almost 3 years, prior to that, I'm still kind of going like this. I knew I wanted to keep growing. I knew that was sort of a natural next step for me. And so I just thought of it as an opportunity to scale and like condense, the amount of learnings that I could take on in a very short period of time. And that was really the main reason I saw that as a great opportunity. Also, the ability to work remote, that was already in place before COVID happened, right? So I'm thinking, I was driving 45 minutes each way, and I'm just like, man, I'm going to get a remote role. This is going to be great. Like me and my wife talk about having kids, like, so.
They sold you on the remote working, and then you looked around 2 weeks later and you're like, oh man, that wasn't a perk anymore.
Yeah. Guys. 2 weeks later, everybody's got it.
Well, now you took that experience, and then your current role now, the VP of growth at Lasso. What's that look like for you now? How'd you transition into that role?
Yeah, same thing. Like I wasn't looking to leave. I actually really was enjoying the role I was in. I mean, it was very challenging from the sense that I had this big puzzle to figure out with all these companies, and that constantly had my mind running and trying to be creative and being imaginative. But I just got presented with this opportunity, and what really stood out to me was the ability to get back to hands-on marketing. I love the ability to jump on calls and talk through stuff and kind of skim the surface and, do all those things. But I think at the end of the day, we've talked about, I love to create. I love to feel the impact. I love to build things. I love, in a lot of ways, the ambiguity of a startup. I love, driving towards something that's much bigger than me. And so when I heard more and more about Lasso and what we were doing, and then saw the product and talked to the people that were here, it felt like a no-brainer to me, and so that's the important part, is now I get to do strategy. I also am in the weeds and doing stuff, and that scratches both of those itches for me to kind of keep growing in one direction in my career on the strategy side, and at the end of the day still feel connected to marketing, that I have a good pulse on what's going on, the conversations people are having, and how people are taking advantage of the current market.
Do you have a team at Lasso under you?
I do. I've got 5 people on my team now. When I started, it was tough because I was hired, and then I hired 2 people at the same time as me starting, right? And I think some of that imposter syndrome got me, because I was like, I know nothing about this industry. How can I, effectively lead people that I just hired, right, off the bat, that also don't know the industry? And so we had to figure it out together. Now my team's at 5, so it's doubled in size, and 6 including myself. But I've got, an SDR on my team. I've got 2, really talented marketing managers on my team that are just HubSpot whizzes. I've got a content marketer who's phenomenal, and then she brought somebody over that is also on the content team, who is really like driving some good projects for us. So like we've really got a good team. It's a young team. And it keeps me motivated to keep coming in each day.
Drew, you mentioned imposter syndrome, and I think that's something for a lot of people in leadership, especially first-time leadership, or even people that have gone down their career. Maybe they're pivoting into different areas or new roles. How'd you kind of overcome that imposter syndrome? And was there like a moment where you didn't feel like that anymore? Kind of like it was the aha moment for you in your career, or at least at Lasso?
Yeah, I don't know. I have a little bit more of like this intellectual take on it. It sounds weird, but I think it does have a lot to do with ego. Like I really got down this path of thinking about ego and insecurities, and kind of eliminating these negative thoughts that would creep up in my head. I would go down these wheels, right, where you've got one bad thought, and then all of a sudden you've got another bad thought, and because you entertain that thought, it starts to snowball, right? And so I spent a lot of late nights just thinking about, man, how can I be better at my job? How can I better lead my team? What am I going to do about these things I don't know? And I think at some point you just got to say, hey, look, it's okay not to know it all. I'd rather be curious, ask the right questions, figure out who does know what I need to know, use them as a resource. And so I think I really had to catch myself before I let myself go down those paths to begin with, right? You don't have to entertain every thought that comes into your head. That was a game changer for me. Right, because it's like you can act like if you're aware, right, like you can actually pick and choose which thoughts you want to hold on to. And so once I really became aware of that, like that really helped me get past that. I wasn't going to bed frustrated or full of anxiety. I went to bed knowing that I did everything I could, the best that I could, and there are always going to be things I don't know, no matter how much I know, right? Like, and so if you're at peace with that helps a lot.
I think you nailed it there. I mean, we had Larry Long Jr. on a couple of weeks ago, and he's super motivational, inspiring guy. And
he's awesome.
The person you talk to the most is yourself, and you control that narrative, but usually that's a negative conversation, and that's the first narrative you need to change, is that conversation with yourself before you go out there and you feel confident in what you do every day. So yeah, you nailed it on that. What advice would you give to, a first-time manager if they're making their first hires, like during the interview process? What should they be looking for? Or do you have any tips or hacks or even favorite interview questions?
Ooh.
I'm going to ask you my worst interview question I've ever asked at the end. So
Okay. Well, and I'm not prepared for that, so you're scaring me with that one. I don't know. Like it takes. I don't know that there's like a silver bullet to figure out how to make the right hires. Like I think you have to take a look at maybe your own deficiencies just from a skill set standpoint. I love to hire people that can do things that I can't do.
Yeah.
I think that makes for a more well-rounded team, more versatile. We know a little bit more clearly where our swim lanes or strengths lie, and I think that creates like a sense of responsibility and accountability on its own. So I always look to that. I love the idea of hiring will over skill. I say that a lot, but
Yep.
I want to find people that are curious and serious about their development. And look, you don't have to be a workaholic to be serious about that. Like that's not what this is. It's really just about, do you have that like thirst for more and what you don't know and improving and being, a self-starter. So I love that. I love the idea of attitude over experience, similar but different, right? Like you kind of mentioned something earlier about sometimes it's nice to find somebody that's in a niche that can bring a different perspective versus somebody that's been around and done this thing 6 or 7 times, right? Because maybe they're jaded, maybe they're not moldable or malleable in that sense. And so I think that's also an interesting way to look at it. But I love the attitude that you bring in. We've all been in environments where political games are played and gossip and this and that and the other. If you can avoid that, man, that really does wonders for your team. And so I look for that. I don't know if I've got like I don't know if I've got like a money.
You put some really good advice in there, and it goes back to that being confident. And once you get over that imposter syndrome, it allows you to probably recognize what your weaknesses are and hire for them. Versus, I see a lot of bad leadership people that they're afraid to hire for their weaknesses, and they're worried about people that might be better than them in certain areas. And you just got to double down on those areas and
that's right.
Find out the people that could help you and get you through that. Because you know what, even if they do pass you one day, I mean, it might just be for the better.
Yeah, we're all on different roads, man, and that's a good point. Like I don't know if we'll get into that in this conversation, but it's important to know when you are looking for roles, you're going to run into roles that you think are right up your alley, companies that you think are right up your alley, and you just don't get the job. That's happened to all of us, right? I've gotten to the final stage with a couple companies and roles that I really, really wanted. I thought they were the perfect fit for me. And, we brought up COVID, but like one of them was, I knew somebody that ended up getting that job, and it turns out, she was friends with the hiring manager, and that's cool. But that's just another example of something you don't know that's happening behind the scenes. But they let her go during, COVID, right? Whereas I still had a job. And so you don't always recognize those moments right when they're happening, but those can be blessings in disguise, similar to what you just mentioned with somebody passing you up. We're all on different paths, right?
There's so many variables in that interview process. I mean, the advice we give to people, first of all, you're allowed to be frustrated. It's an emotional game. It's what you do every day. It's your livelihood. But you got to also realize that if you're in that final round interview, like you're the 99th percentile. Like you made it through that giant pool of applicants, and then you got filtered through those rounds of interviews, that presentation. Like you make it to the end, like you're at the final show. You might not get that last ticket punched, but you have to look at that and build off of that as like a win and turn those losses into a win, because that's the only way you can get through it. Because interviewing's tough. It's not easy.
Interviewing is so tough. You know that better than anybody, just where you're at. But I mean, it's easy to. We're just talking about mindset and talking negative to yourself and things like. It's easy to get frustrated at yourself and question what you did wrong in those processes. So I think it's important to just know, to your point, Chris, there are a lot of variables that exist that you probably can't see, that you have no idea what's going on. Maybe it's a blessing in disguise that you didn't get hired there, right? Like, you never know.
Well, Drew, talking back to interviewing, since you've had all these experiences transitioning your career and then breaking into SaaS, which there's so many people that are probably sitting in a role that they're uncomfortable or they're not happy about and they want to switch in, or an industry that they want to break into. What's a piece of interviewing advice that you'd give to somebody, how to do that, or what they should keep in mind?
Yeah, like I would go back first of all to that point, the point I made about try to find somebody that's already, in those shoes already. Like that, use those resources that are out there. Like LinkedIn's such a great place right now. It's different than it was a year or two ago even, right? Like people are having conversations all the time, and a lot of people are giving back and really respectful of those opportunities. I know if someone reached out to me, I'd be more than willing to help. So I think that's number one. Two, I think you need to understand where your milestones are that currently exist in your current state, right? Like what are those amazing things that you've already done and accomplished, and have those as, the core elements to how you're going to interview and what you're going to lean on. And, resumes are flawed, right? Like you just need to get in the door, because resumes show all the, amazing things you've done, but they never talk about the failures that got you there.
Yeah.
So I think that you could flip that and use that as another piece in your interview. Talk about the times that you failed. Be vulnerable. Talk about the transformative moments, how you pivoted, how you reacted to those things. And, I think the last thing is an obvious one, but you got to be yourself. You can't try to appease the interviewers or the company of what you think they want to hear, because you'll end up working for a company that, may be a great date. Yeah, but they're not worthy of a relationship, and it's just, like it is okay to like portray something that you're not yet. I think there's an unlock there, because by saying some of those things out loud, that kind of puts a fire under your butt, So I think it's like identify the transformative moments, the milestones, be true to yourself, and usually things will work out for the best, and you'll end up where you're supposed to be.
Yeah, shoot your shot, but definitely be true to yourself. And if you're going to oversell yourself, make sure you get in there and back it up. I think that's the important thing too.
That's right. That's right.
Drew, I got one or two more fun questions for you. If you could have, my second to last one is, if you could have any meal or your favorite meal, what would it be? What's your favorite food, favorite meal? I'm a foodie, and that's why I ask everyone. Just curious.
Favorite meal. I'm not sure if people outside of St. Louis are going to know this one, but give me like an Emo's pizza. Give me an Emo's pizza, toasted raviolis. These are like things only St. Louis people know.
All right.
And I'm set. Like that's the key. Now I will say, if you're curious about Emo, so it's thin crust pizza. Not everybody's a fan of the whole like cracker style pizza, but they do ship, and it's not that expensive now. So that's been a game changer.
I'm a Jersey guy, man. So the land of pizza up here, you can always have pizza with me. That's not a problem.
You're gonna think this is trash then.
No, I appreciate a thin crust. I appreciate all forms of pizza.
Yeah,
there's even a time and a place for some Domino's if you really late at night on a weekend. But Drew,
there's a very small time and place.
Yeah, very small time and place. This is the worst interview question I have ever asked people. It is, if you could be one color, what color would you be and why?
Oh, what's the psychology of this?
Honestly, the psychology around it was I just tried to get people. If somebody was a little too uncomfortable in an interview, and I used to work in a very buttoned up place, and people would come in really stiff into their interview, so it would just kind of just break it up a little bit, and I could get to see a little bit of the personality. So it kind of worked, but I got some wild answers.
I love me a good blue, and I love me a good green. So I would say something in between there, like a teal, turquoise, something like that.
All right. Any why behind it?
Just reminds me of like all the great things in life, right? Like just all the best things I feel like are either blue or green. Money, water,
ocean, grass,
beaches. Yeah. I mean, just that's where my mind goes. Yeah.
I used to, in all fairness, tell people then to act it out, but I haven't necessarily to do that on a podcast. And
Chris, I got to end this interview, man.
Yeah. The best answer I ever got was sparkles, and that was a fun one.
I want to see that.
Drew, thank you so much for your time today. I mean, I wish we actually had more time, because there's a lot more I wanted to dive into with you. But where can people find you? If somebody wants to follow somebody that's kind of carved a path out into SaaS, like where should they go look for you?
I would just say, LinkedIn's probably the best place to reach out to me right now. I've really gravitated toward LinkedIn this year. You know, what's awesome about LinkedIn, I think, recently is you see a lot more people being active, sharing good advice, supporting one another, and creating relationships online, which I think really is fostered out of the whole COVID being remote thing, right? We're not scratching some of the itches that we used to scratch by being in the office together. And we crave, you know, meeting new people in different environments. And so that's been awesome for me. I've taken several of those conversations on Zooms, gotten a lot of good value out of there. So if you reach out to me on LinkedIn, happy to connect, happy to answer any questions that you have. And same, like if I have any questions for you, I'd love for you to answer them. You know, so that's probably the best spot.
Amazing. Drew, I know you are being the VP of growth, I am sure is a busy job, but even with your even bigger promotion last year to dad, I'm sure you're a busy guy. So I thank you so much for being on today. I hope there's somebody out there that you impacted that's thinking about their next career move, and really, really appreciate your time.
Thanks a lot, Chris. Appreciate you guys having me on.
Awesome. Catch you soon, Drew. Take care.
Thanks.